Check out Genesis chapter 5, would you please? We'll look at it Wednesday evening, but let's look at it this morning, and I want to show you something. It's a listing of the first generations of mankind. And jot this down on a piece of paper. I think you'll want to refer to it later. It says concerning the genealogy of man, the days of Adam, verse 4, after he had begotten Seth, were 800 years. The name Adam means man. That's what the name Adam literally means. The name the name Adam means man. He had a son, verse 6, whose name was Seth, who lived 105 years. And then Seth begat his first son. The name Seth means appointed. Jot that down. Make that note. Adam means man. Seth means appointed. Now Seth, verse 6, goes on to say, he begat Enos. The name Enos literally means subject to death. The name Adam means man. Seth means appointed. Enos means subject to death. Enos had a son whose name, verse 9, was Cainan. And Cainan, as many of you may know from other studies, means sorrowful. It means sorrowful. Now, Cainan had a son. He was the first Hawaiian, verse 12, Mahaleel. So Mahaleel, from Waikiki. Mahaleel, his name, verse 12, means literally from the presence of God. From the presence of God. Mahaleel had a son, verse 15, whose name was Jared. And the name Jared means one comes down. And then Jared, he had a son whose name that many of you will recognize, and most of you may even know what his name means. He had a son named Enoch, verse 18. Enoch means dedicated. And Enoch was dedicated, wasn't he? He walked with God and he never died. He just walked with God right up to heaven. Well, Enoch, he had a son, verse 21, who lived longer than anybody else in history. His name was Methuselah. And the name Methuselah means literally, dying he shall send. Now, why does his name mean that? What was the reason for that? Well, the year that Methuselah died, what did God send? Does anybody recall? The flood, thank you. The year Methuselah died, God sent the flood. Methuselah was a living prophecy, but that's another story that we'll get into later. Methuselah, his name means dying he shall send. Methuselah had a son named Lamech. Lamech, verse 26. Methuselah had a son whose name was Lamech. And Lamech means poor and lowly, or to the poor and lowly. Lamech, poor and lowly, or to the poor and lowly. And Lamech, last one, Lamech had a son, verse 29, whose name was what? Noah. And the name Noah, as your margin tells you, if you have a margin or a study Bible, Noah's name means rest or comfort. So what, you say? Well, here's what. I respond. Check it out. This genealogy, not only showing that man comes and goes, and that's another lesson entirely, but notice when you put the names together what you have. Man, Adam, appointed, Seth, subject to death, Enos, sorrowful, Canaan. From the presence of one comes down, Mahaleel. From the presence of God, Mahaleel, one comes down, Jared, dedicated, Enoch. Dying he shall send, Methuselah, to the poor and lowly, Lamech, rest and comfort. Now let me read that in totality. Man, appointed subject to death, sorrowful. From the presence of God, one comes down dedicated, and dying he shall send to the poor and lowly rest and comfort. It's the gospel story embedded in the 5th chapter of what would seem to be a boring genealogy. It's the entire story of the gospel. It's all that you really need to know. Man, subject unto death, sorrowing, sad situation. But from the presence of God, one comes down, and dying he shall send to the poor and lowly rest and comfort. That's the gospel story. I say this to simply show you that you can spend a lifetime studying through the Word and keep on discovering new insights, but it might take many readings before certain things come together. And I am confident, should the Lord tarry, that in the next 20 years I'll be reading through the same section of Genesis and see entirely new things that are presently unknown to me. That's the way it is in the Word. You read consistently, folks.